In the heart of the galaxy, where stars twinkled like diamonds, there was a quiet and strange place known as the shelter. It wasn't like any regular shelter. This one was a home to aliens from all over the universe. Some were friendly. Others were dangerous, but all of them had one thing in common. They were abandoned. The shelter was located on a remote planet, far away from any known civilization. It had tall metal walls that seemed to hum with life, and the cold air carried the scent of machines and distant stars. The building was always dimly lit, with harsh white lights flickering in the hallways. The rooms were cold, and the floors were covered with dust as if no one ever really cared about what happened there. The man who entered the shelter that day had no idea what to expect. He had heard stories about the place, but nothing prepared him for what he would see. His name was Marcus, a soldier who had grown tired of the endless battles and wars. He didn't care for the fame or the glory anymore. He just wanted peace. He walked slowly through the narrow corridors, his boots echoing with every step. The walls were lined with cages, each one holding an alien. Some of them stared blankly into space, while others paced back and forth, their eyes filled with fear. Marcus couldn't help but feel sorry for them. Most of them didn't deserve to be here. As he passed one of the cages, something caught his eye. A small figure was sitting at the far end, curled up in the corner. It was a girl. At first, he thought she was just another alien, but there was something about her that made him stop. She had pale skin, almost white, with soft silver hair that fell around her shoulders. Her big eyes stared out from behind the bars, filled with sadness. She didn't look like the other aliens. She looked different. Her expression was empty, like she had given up on everything. But there was something else too, a sense of deep pain that Marcus could feel, even from a distance. He stood frozen for a moment, watching her. He had never seen an alien like her before. She looked so fragile, so lost. The other aliens didn't seem to notice her, as if they were too used to seeing her here. But Marcus couldn't look away. "What happened to you?" he whispered under his breath, though he knew she couldn't hear him. He didn't know why, but he felt a strong pull towards her. There was something inside him that said he couldn't just walk away. He had to help her. His fingers twitched at his side, as if he were ready to reach out to her. But before he could make a move, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Do not approach that one," a cold, robotic voice said from behind him. Marcus turned to see a tall, metallic figure standing in the doorway. It was the shelter's caretaker, a robot that ran the place. Its glowing eyes fixed on Marcus, and its mechanical body creaked with every movement. "Why?" Marcus asked, his curiosity getting the best of him. "Her presence here is dangerous," the robot replied. "She was brought here after a failed experiment. She is not like the others. She is not to be touched." Marcus frowned. "Dangerous?" That didn't sound right. He took a step closer to the cage, his eyes never leaving the girl. "What's her name?" Marcus asked softly. The robot hesitated for a moment, then responded, "She has no name. She is an experiment, not a person." Marcus felt a pang of anger at the robot's cold words. He couldn't believe it. This girl, who looked so lost and alone, was nothing more than an experiment to them. He had seen cruelty in his life, but this felt different. This felt wrong. He glanced back at the girl, who hadn't moved. She was still staring at him with those sad eyes, as if she didn't even know he was there. Marcus's heart softened, and he made up his mind. "I want to adopt her," he said firmly. The robot's eyes blinked, clearly surprised. "Adopt her? She is not available for adoption." "Why not?" Marcus insisted. "She's not an experiment. She's a person. She deserves a chance." The robot remained silent for a moment, its glowing eyes flickering. Marcus could see that it was processing the request, though it seemed reluctant. "She is not safe," the robot finally said. "Her past is dangerous. The people who created her are still looking for her." Marcus didn't care. He had made up his mind he would take her. He couldn't leave her here, alone and forgotten. "I'll take full responsibility," he said. his voice strong. "I'll keep her safe." The robot studied him for a moment longer before nodding slowly. "Very well. You can adopt her. But be warned, her past will not let her go easily." Marcus didn't care. All that mattered was that he was going to take this girl with him and give her a life beyond this cold, dark shelter. He turned back to the girl, who was still sitting in the cage. Slowly, he approached, his footsteps soft. He didn't want to scare her. When he reached the bars, he looked at her and smiled, though she didn't react. He reached through the bars, gently touching her hand. Her skin was cold, but it was soft. "It's okay," Marcus whispered. "I'm here. You're not alone anymore." The girl didn't respond, but for the first time, Marcus felt like he had made the right choice. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let her face it alone. The moment Marcus signed the papers to adopt the alien girl, he felt a weight settle on his shoulders, but there was also something else, something deeper. He had made his choice, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for what lay ahead. The shelter's cold, dimly lit walls seemed to close in on him as he held the girl's fragile hand in his. Her name was not known, not even to herself. The robot caretaker had mentioned something about a failed experiment, a mysterious past, full of secrets and dangers that lurked in the dark corners of the galaxy. But Marcus wasn't concerned with that. The moment he saw her eyes, the emptiness in them, he knew he couldn't just leave her here. The shelter was no place for a young girl, especially one like her. Her sadness seemed to bleed through every inch of her being, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that it was his responsibility to help her, to give her a chance at something better. As they left the shelter, Marcus couldn't help but glance over his shoulder. The dark, towering building stood ominously behind them, its flickering lights casting long shadows. He had never felt more uncertain, yet more certain of his decision at the same time. The unknown loomed large in front of him, but one thing was clear: he couldn't turn back now. The journey to his home was long and silent. The girl sat next to him in the transport pod, her wide eyes staring out at the passing stars, her small hands clutching the edge of her seat. She hadn't spoken a word since they left the shelter, and Marcus couldn't tell if she even realized what had happened. The air in the pod was cold, filled with the low hum of the engines, but it felt oddly comforting to Marcus. He glanced at the girl again, studying her delicate features. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her white hair shimmered in the dim light. She was beautiful in a way that was both otherworldly and haunting, but it wasn't just her appearance that held his attention. It was the deep sadness in her eyes, the way she seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 untold stories. After what felt like hours, they finally arrived at his home, a small, isolated cabin on the edge of a forested planet. The place was peaceful, far from the chaos of the galaxy. Marcus had chosen it specifically for the silence, the space, and the freedom it offered. But as he led the girl inside, he realized how empty it felt. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but this didn't feel like the start of a new chapter. "Welcome to your new home," he said quietly, as he opened the door and gestured for her to enter. His voice was gentle, trying to soothe the uncertainty that hung in the air. She looked at him with those same wide eyes, but didn't move. She seemed frozen, as though unsure of where she was, or perhaps afraid to step into this new world. Marcus knelt down to her level, his face softening. "It's okay," he reassured her. "You're safe here. You don't have to be scared." The girl didn't respond, but she slowly took a step forward. Her bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor as she entered the cabin, her small form barely making a ripple in the space around her. Marcus watched her closely, waiting for her to speak or react, but nothing came. She was still lost in her own thoughts, her own pain. He sighed, standing up and walking over to a nearby table. He poured a glass of water and turned back to her, offering it with a kind smile. "I know things have been hard for you," he said, "but here I want to help you heal. We'll take it one step at a time." She stared at the glass of water but didn't reach for it. Her eyes were distant, lost in a world Marcus couldn't understand. For a moment he felt helpless. How could he help her if she didn't even know how to help herself? But then something inside him clicked. He remembered why he was here. He wasn't just here to give her a place to stay. He was here to give her a life. A life filled with possibilities, with laughter, with hope. He wasn't sure how he would do it, but he had to try. "Listen," he said softly, taking a seat across from her. "I don't know your story and I can't pretend to understand it. But I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone anymore. If you'll let me, I want to help you. Together we'll figure this out." There was a long pause and Marcus held his breath, waiting. Would she speak? Would she let him in? Slowly, the girl raised her eyes to meet his, and for the first time Marcus saw a flicker of something. Hope, or perhaps curiosity. She didn't speak, but her gaze lingered on him, as if searching for something. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Marcus smiled, relieved that she had at least acknowledged him. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but he knew that this was just the beginning. He would be patient. He would give her time. As the night settled around them, Marcus made them both a small meal. They ate in silence, and though the girl said nothing, he could feel the quiet weight of her presence beside him. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was peaceful. When they finished eating, Marcus led her to a small bedroom in the back of the cabin. "This is yours," he said. "You can sleep here. Make it your own." The girl didn't speak, but she nodded slowly. She didn't seem fully present, but there was a subtle change in her, something in her eyes that told Marcus she wasn't quite as lost as she had been before. He had no idea what her past held, but he knew one thing. This was only the beginning of their journey together. As Marcus turned to leave the room, he paused at the door. "Good night," he said softly, and without waiting for an answer, he left her to rest. The night was still, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The days in the small cabin passed slowly, as the peaceful routine settled into place. Marcus did everything he could to help the girl feel comfortable. He gave her space when she needed it and offered his support when she seemed ready to engage. But most of the time she remained distant, almost as if she were lost in a world of her own. Her name, or the lack of it, continued to haunt Marcus. He wanted to call her something, anything, because the girl felt wrong, like she was nothing more than a stranger in his life. But she wouldn't speak. Not yet. One morning, a strange thing happened. Marcus was preparing breakfast in the kitchen, chopping vegetables when he felt it, an energy. It wasn't physical, but it was there, swirling in the air around him. The air grew thicker. The temperature dropped just slightly, and he could hear a faint hum, a hum that came from the girl's direction. He turned, only to see her standing still in the doorway, her eyes fixed on the floor. Her hair, usually falling perfectly around her face, was floating slightly as if caught in an invisible breeze. Her hands were trembling, and there was an aura of tension around her. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, his voice laced with concern. He walked towards her, but she didn't move. Her eyes met his for a fleeting moment and then quickly darted away as if she couldn't bear to hold his gaze. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice was shaky, almost inaudible. But Marcus wasn't convinced. He could feel it, the power in the room. There was something wrong, something deep inside her, and for the first time he realized that maybe adopting her wasn't just about giving her a safe place. There was something else. He watched her carefully, his instincts telling him to be cautious yet not afraid. He took a deep breath and spoke again, his tone gentle but firm. "You don't have to hide from me. I can help you." But the girl shook her head, her eyes filling with an emotion Marcus couldn't quite place, fear, sorrow, or something darker. It was as if something was holding her back from letting go. "Please," she murmured. "I can't. I'm not like you." Marcus stepped closer, trying to bridge the gap between them. He had always known there was more to her than met the eye. But now, seeing the fear in her face, he understood that she was not just hiding from her past. She was running from it. The girl backed away slightly, her shoulders trembling. I didn't choose this. I didn't ask for this power. Marcus paused, a knot forming in his stomach. Power? What do you mean? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned away, her steps slow and hesitant, as though she were afraid of something in the very air around them. I don't want to hurt anyone, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Marcus could speak again, a sudden harsh noise pierced the silence, a loud crackling sound that shook the walls of the cabin. The lights flickered, and a low hum filled the room. The girl froze, her eyes wide with terror. What's happening? Marcus demanded, his voice rising with concern. I can't control it, she stammered, her body beginning to shake violently. Marcus rushed to her side, trying to reach out. But before he could, the air around them thickened, charged with energy. The girl's hands were shaking uncontrollably, and from the tips of her fingers blue sparks shot out, crackling through the room. The lights flickered again, this time almost completely going out before coming back on. Stop it, Marcus shouted, grabbing her wrists, but the force of the energy was too strong. She recoiled, her body jerking back as if fighting the power inside her. I didn't mean to, she cried. I don't know how to stop it. But Marcus wasn't frightened. He could see the terror in her eyes. This wasn't something she wanted. This was something she couldn't control. He gently placed his hands on her shoulders, trying to calm her down, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. Listen to me, he said firmly, his voice steady. You're safe here. Whatever this is, I'll help you. You don't have to be afraid of it. The girl's breath came in short, panicked gasps. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. You don't understand. I was made for this. They did this to me. I was meant to be a weapon. Marcus's heart sank as he heard the words, the weight of them crashing down on him like a storm. He had known she was different, but to hear that she was created for destruction, it made him feel helpless. They used me, the girl continued, her voice breaking. I was a prisoner. They tested me, pushed me beyond my limits. They wanted me to be their perfect weapon, but I'm not a weapon, I'm just me. She broke down in tears, collapsing into Marcus's arms. He held her tightly, not knowing what to say. This girl, this beautiful, broken soul, had been through horrors he couldn't imagine. She had been shaped by cruel hands, her mind twisted by the people who had controlled her every move. But what troubled him more was the power she had inside her. It was raw, untamed, and dangerous. She didn't know how to control it, and from what she had just told him, she might never learn to. What's your name? Marcus asked softly, his fingers gently brushing her hair. You have to have one. You're not just a weapon. You're not just some experiment. She looked up at him, her eyes still wet with tears. For a moment, she didn't answer. But then, very softly, she spoke. My name is Lyra. Marcus smiled, a small, comforting smile, even though his heart was heavy with the truth. Lyra wasn't just an innocent girl. She was a weapon of unimaginable power, created to bring destruction. But she was still a person, his responsibility now. I'll help you, Lyra, he said firmly. We'll figure this out. Together. And so, with that promise, Marcus took the first step in a journey that would change both of their lives forever. The days after Lyra's breakdown were tense, filled with a strange mix of hope and fear. Marcus did everything he could to keep her calm, though it was clear that something inside her was still churning, something powerful and dangerous. Lyra was more distant than before, retreating into herself in ways that made Marcus both frustrated and sad. He could see the internal battle raging within her, the fear of her own abilities and the constant reminder that she had been molded into something she didn't want to be. Marcus knew she was struggling, but he didn't know how to reach her. He couldn't force her to open up, and the more he tried, the more she withdrew. It was as if her mind had shut off, locking away any part of her that could be healed. Then one evening, something changed. Marcus had been working on some repairs in the cabin, the hum of his tools filling the air, when he heard it. A soft sound, almost like a whisper coming from the other room. He froze, wondering if his mind was playing tricks on him. He had grown used to the silence of the cabin, but this was different. He stood up, putting his tools down, and walked cautiously towards the room where Lyra had been spending most of her time. The door was slightly ajar, and as Marcus peered inside, he saw her standing near the window, staring out at the forest. "Lyra?" he called softly. She didn't turn. Her back was to him, her body tense like she was aware of his presence but unwilling to acknowledge it. "Lyra, what's going on?" he asked, stepping into the room. Without turning to face him, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can hear them." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "The voices," she said, her eyes vacant as she stared into the distance. "They're in my head. I can hear them calling me." Marcus took a cautious step forward, his worry deepening. "Lyra, you need to fight it. You don't have to listen to them." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I can't. They're too strong. They've always been there, ever since they created me." Marcus's blood ran cold. He had suspected that Lyra's past wasn't something easily forgotten, but hearing her speak like this about voices, about being controlled, it was a chilling confirmation of the kind of experiments she had endured. Before Marcus could say anything else, the room grew colder, the air thick with a strange energy. Lyra's body stiffened, her hands trembling at her sides as if trying to fight against an invisible force. Her breathing became shallow and uneven, and Marcus could see the panic in her eyes. "Lyra, what's happening?" "You have to focus," Marcus urged, rushing to her side. But it was too late. Without warning, the energy in the room flared. A loud, sharp crack filled the air, followed by the sudden surge of power that seemed to explode from Lyra's body. Marcus barely had time to react as the room was filled with blinding light, the air around them charged with electricity. Lyra's body trembled, her eyes wide with terror as the force inside her grew uncontrollable. Her powers, which she had so carefully tried to hide, were now unleashed, wild, untamed, and violent. "Lyra!" Marcus shouted over the crackling energy, grabbing her arms, but it was like trying to hold onto a storm. The force that radiated from her was too strong, pushing him back with a force he couldn't withstand. She cried out, her voice breaking. "I can't stop it. I can't control it." Panic filled Marcus's chest, but he didn't back down. He couldn't. He knew that if he didn't reach her now, the power inside her could destroy everything. "Listen to me," Marcus yelled, forcing his way closer to her. "You're stronger than this. You're in control." Lyra's eyes met his, but there was nothing in them. No recognition, no understanding. She was lost in the storm of her own abilities, consumed by the power that had been forced upon her. And then, something happened. As the storm of energy reached its peak, Lyra's entire body went limp. The light in the room dimmed and the crackling energy faded away. For a moment, everything was still. Marcus stood frozen, his heart racing, waiting for some sign that Lyra was still there. The silence was deafening, and for a brief moment he feared the worst. And then he saw it. Her chest rose and fell with a deep breath, her body finally relaxing. But her eyes remained closed, her face pale and drawn, as if the storm inside her had taken everything out of her. Carefully, Marcus lifted her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. Her skin was cold and her body felt frail, as though she had given everything she had to survive the explosion of power. "Lyra," Marcus whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. "What did they do to you?" Her eyes fluttered open, her gaze focusing slowly on him. There was confusion in her eyes, but there was something else too. Something darker, something she hadn't shown before. "They made me like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They took everything from me. My past, my future, everything. I was supposed to be their weapon." Marcus could barely speak. The weight of her words settled heavily in his chest. She wasn't just a victim, she was something far more complicated. A weapon, a tool, a person whose very existence had been shaped by the cruel hands of others. But as he held her close, he realized something important. He wasn't just trying to save her from her past. He was helping her find a future. And though the road ahead would be filled with danger, with secrets that could destroy them both, he wasn't going to give up on her. "I'll help you, Lyra," Marcus said firmly. "Whatever it takes, we'll figure this out." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but there was something in her gaze that hadn't been there before, a glimmer of hope. And for the first time since she had arrived at his cabin, Marcus believed that hope might just be enough to guide them through the darkness. The days that followed Lyra's breakdown were heavy, like a storm cloud that never seemed to lift. Marcus tried to help her regain control, offering her comfort and reassurance. But it was clear that something inside her had been broken beyond repair. Her past, whatever it had been, was like a ghost that haunted her, an invisible weight that seemed to crush her every time she let herself remember. Still, there were small signs of progress. She started speaking more, though only in whispers. As if afraid to disturb the fragile peace that had settled between them, she had shared more about her powers, the strange, uncontrollable energy that flowed through her veins, a power she didn't understand and couldn't tame. She confessed that every time she used it, she felt like she was losing herself. It wasn't just the power, it was the fear of what she could become, of what she had already been made into. But one morning, something changed. Marcus woke early, as he always did, to start his routine, fixing the cabin, making breakfast, checking their supplies. He moved through the quiet house as usual, but when he stepped into the kitchen, he found Lyra sitting at the table, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She was staring at something, a small, worn device in her hands. He hadn't seen it before. It was a communicator, the kind used by high-ranking officers in special forces, something far beyond anything he had ever owned. The sleek black surface was scratched and faded, but it was unmistakable. Lyra's fingers traced the device, her eyes distant. "Where did you get that?" Marcus asked cautiously, stepping closer. Lyra didn't look up, her voice cold and almost emotionless. "It's part of who I am." Marcus froze. His heart began to race. "What do you mean by that?" She sighed, her fingers tightening around the device. For a moment it seemed like she was going to say more, but then she fell silent. Her eyes flickered, and Marcus could almost see the walls going up again. But this time, he wasn't going to let her retreat. "I need you to tell me the truth, Lyra," Marcus said, sitting down opposite her. "You've been hiding something from me. This isn't just some experiment you were part of. I know you didn't just stumble into this power." She didn't respond, but the silence between them was thick, heavy with words left unspoken. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lyra looked up at him. Her eyes darkened with something Marcus hadn't seen before. It was fear, but it was more than that. It was the weight of a secret so heavy it had the power to destroy everything. "Listen to me," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "I wasn't just made. I was chosen. They didn't just experiment on me. They created me. I was bred for a single purpose: to be a weapon, a living, breathing tool of war." Marcus blinked, his mind struggling to absorb the words. "A weapon," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her eyes filling with a pain so raw it made Marcus's chest ache. "I was meant to be the perfect soldier, a weapon they could control. My abilities were engineered, enhanced through genetic manipulation. Everything about me was designed to be used, to be their weapon in the war they were planning." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I couldn't," Lyra replied, her voice barely audible. "Because the more I remember, the more it scares me. They didn't just want to control my power. They wanted me to forget who I was, who I could be. I was supposed to be a tool, an obedient soldier who never asked questions, who never thought for herself, but I couldn't." She paused, swallowing hard, as if the words were painful to say. "They made me forget everything about myself. My past, my family, my people. They wiped it all away until I was nothing more than a weapon. But when I was brought to that shelter, when I was abandoned, something broke inside me. I couldn't remember what they had taken from me, but I could feel it. And every day, it gets harder to ignore. Marcus sat back in his chair, stunned by the weight of her revelation. He had always known there was something extraordinary about Lyra, but he never imagined it went this deep. She wasn't just some innocent alien girl trapped in a cage. She was a creation, a living weapon, forged for war, but Marcus wasn't afraid. He couldn't be. She was still Lyra, the girl who had been abandoned, the girl he had promised to protect. Even if her past was filled with darkness and betrayal, he wasn't going to let that define her. So, what does this mean for you now? Marcus asked quietly. Lyra's eyes filled with tears and she wiped them away quickly, as if embarrassed by her weakness. It means I'm dangerous. The power inside me, it was never meant to be used for good. If I let it go, if I lose control, again I could destroy everything around me. I don't know what I'll become if that happens. Marcus's heart broke for her. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the fear of what she might become. But he also saw something else, something stronger, something she hadn't fully realized yet. You're not a weapon, Lyra, he said firmly. You're more than that. You're not defined by what they tried to make you. I know you're scared, but you're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out. Together. Lyra looked at him, her face softening, though the fear in her eyes remained. She was still uncertain, still struggling with the weight of her past. But for the first time, Marcus saw a glimmer of something else. Hope. I don't know if I can control it, Lyra said softly, her voice filled with doubt. We'll take it one step at a time, Marcus replied. You don't have to do this alone. I'll be here no matter what happens. For a moment there was silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a shared understanding, an unspoken bond forged in the reality of their situation. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were learning to live, to rebuild, to trust in something greater than the darkness of the past. Lyra took a deep breath, her gaze steadying on Marcus. Thank you, she whispered. Marcus smiled gently, though the weight of what lay ahead hung in the air between them. But no matter what challenges they would face, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let Lyra fall. Not now. Not ever. The sun had barely risen when Marcus heard the first rumble of the engines, a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the walls of the cabin. Lyra had been restless for days, her uneasy silence making Marcus more and more anxious. The truth of her origins had begun to sink in, and the reality of the danger she was still in weighed heavily on both of them, but they couldn't run forever. Lyra hadn't slept much in the past few days, her thoughts racing as the memories she'd buried began to claw their way back to the surface. Marcus had tried everything to calm her, but every time she would close, her eyes, a flood of visions would come rushing in, visions of the people who had created her, the experiments, and the cold metal halls that had once been her prison. They haunted her, like shadows that refused to leave. It was in one of these restless moments that the worst possible thing happened. A knock at the door, sharp, deliberate, 3 solid raps, echoing like a death sentence. Marcus's heart stopped. His instincts flared, and in an instant he was up on his feet, glancing around the room. The door, the window, every exit seemed too close, too vulnerable. His eyes snapped to Lyra, who was standing in the corner of the room, her face pale as the reality of the moment hit her. "They've found us," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Marcus nodded grimly. He could feel the weight of it, the encroaching danger that was no longer a distant threat. It was real now. "What do we do?" Lyra asked, her gaze locking with his. "I can't go back there, Marcus. Not to them. I'll never go back." Marcus looked at her, seeing the terror in her eyes. Eyes that had seen more than any person should. More than any child should. She wasn't just scared of what was happening now. She was terrified of the future, of what the people who had made her would do to reclaim her. We don't go back, Marcus said firmly. We escape. Lyra's eyes widened, disbelief flooding her features. Escape? How? They'll track us down. We don't even know where to go. He had no solid answers, no perfect plan. But Marcus knew one thing: they had to leave. The cabin, this quiet little life they had started to build, was no longer a sanctuary. It was a trap. They're already here, Marcus said, his voice calm but urgent. They won't stop until they have you. But we have a chance. I know. A place, a hidden world. It's off the grid. No one knows about it. If we can get there, we can disappear. They'll never find us. Lyra looked at him, uncertainty clouding her features. But you don't even know if it's real. You said it was a rumor. What if... Lyra, it's our only option, Marcus interrupted, his tone firm. We don't have time to question it. We leave now or we're caught. There was a long pause, and Marcus could see the weight of the decision in Lyra's eyes. But then, after what seemed like an eternity, she nodded. Okay. Let's go. Without another word, Marcus grabbed his pack, pulling out the essentials they would need: food, water, weapons, and the emergency communicator. He handed her a small folded piece of metal. This will get us off the planet if we need it. Don't lose it. Lyra nodded and tucked it into her pocket. Her body was stiff, but her resolve was clear. She wasn't going to let the past dictate her future anymore. The sound of footsteps outside grew louder, closer. Marcus could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. He knew they didn't have much time before the door would be forced open, and then they'd be surrounded. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. They had a chance. It was slim, but it was there. They had to take it. They moved quickly, almost silently, out the back door of the cabin and into the dense woods that surrounded it. The trees were thick, their branches heavy with dew, and the ground beneath their feet was soft, muffling their movements. Every rustle of a branch, every snap of a twig, sent a surge of adrenaline through Marcus's body. Keep your head down, he whispered, his voice barely audible. We don't know how many there are. Lyra was close behind him, her breathing shallow, her pace quickening with every step. She was silent, but Marcus could feel her tension, the fear that still gripped her heart. They moved through the forest for what felt like hours, never stopping, never slowing. The world around them was quiet. Too quiet. It felt like the calm before the storm. And then they reached the clearing. A small, rusted transport ship was hidden in the farthest corner, its hull weathered and beaten by time. It was old, but it would do. It was their ticket out of here. Stay low, Marcus hissed as they crouched behind the ship. He quickly scanned the area, looking for any sign of movement. The last thing they needed was to be seen now. Lyra didn't speak, but she was close, her eyes wide, her hands shaking as they slid into the ship. Marcus moved quickly, securing the hatch behind them. He pulled the emergency control panel to life, his fingers working fast, his mind racing. The ship's engine sputtered to life with a low, grating hum. It wasn't much, but it would get them off this planet. Get ready, Marcus muttered, his eyes flicking to the controls. As the ship lifted off the ground, Marcus saw the flicker of lights in the distance. The searchlights. They were coming. The sky above them was dark, filled with stars. And as the ship broke through the atmosphere, Marcus allowed himself a breath of relief. They were free. For now. But it was only the beginning. Lyra sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the stars outside, the window. Her body was tense, but there was something else. Something in her gaze that Marcus hadn't seen before. A spark. A flicker of hope. She wasn't just running anymore. She was escaping, and together, they were going to build a future. One that would be theirs. No one else's. The stars were endless above them, stretching across the sky in a vast, unbroken sea. The ship's engines hummed softly as it sliced through the blackness, pushing forward into the unknown. The air inside the cockpit was cool, and the only sound, besides the engine, was the steady breathing of Lyra beside Marcus. For the first time in days, there was a sense of peace, a quiet, fragile peace. But Marcus knew it wouldn't last. Not forever. The galaxy was vast, and the people who had created Lyra, the ones who had molded her into something dangerous, were still out there. They wouldn't just let her go. They would come for her. He could feel it in his bones. Lyra, however, seemed different now. Her eyes, which had once been filled with terror, were calm, at least for the moment. The weight of her past still lingered, but there was a flicker of something else in her expression. Something new. Hope. "We're not safe yet," Marcus said, quietly, breaking the silence. His voice was low, but steady. He wasn't trying to scare her, but he couldn't lie to her either. They had just escaped one threat, but there were still so many more. The galaxy was a dangerous place, especially for someone like Lyra. Lyra turned her gaze toward him, her eyes meeting his. There was no fear in them now, just determination. "I know," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "But we're not running anymore, Marcus. Not from them, not from anything." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in. For so long it had been about survival, about getting away, hiding, staying under the radar. But now Lyra was ready for something else. She wasn't just running anymore. She was fighting for her future, for the future they could build together. "We can't hide forever," Marcus said, his eyes on the controls as the ship charted a course through the galaxy. "We'll need allies, resources. We'll need to know who's on our side and who's against us." Lyra stood up slowly, moving to the window. She placed her hand on the cool glass, her fingers brushing against the stars. "I don't want to hide. I don't want to run anymore. I've spent my life being a tool for someone else's war, but this is different. I can feel it. The galaxy needs more than just warriors, it needs change." Marcus looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. The girl he had rescued, the girl who had been broken, was beginning to find her voice, her strength. It was more than just survival. Now, it was about taking control of her destiny. "Then we'll fight for it," Marcus said, his voice filled with a quiet confidence. "But we'll do it on our terms. We'll build something new, something better." Lyra turned to face him, her eyes bright. "What do we do first?" Marcus leaned back in his seat, thinking for a moment. "We find the hidden world I mentioned before. If it really is what I think it is, we can use it as a base. We'll gather resources, allies, and information. We can start there. But we need to be prepared. If the people who created you are still out there, they'll come looking for us. Gaterbaum and dear. I'll be ready," Lyra said, her voice unwavering. There was a pause, and then Marcus smiled. "I believe you." For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the ship as it sailed deeper into the unknown. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it didn't feel as dark as it had before. It felt like a new beginning. Together, they could make it. They could fight for a future that wasn't bound by the horrors of Lyra's past. Hours passed, and the ship moved steadily through the black void. The stars outside seemed endless, but the vastness of space didn't feel so intimidating anymore. It felt like an opportunity to build something that was truly their own. Eventually, the ship slowed and Marcus activated the communications system. A small holographic map flickered to life in front of him. He punched in a series of coordinates, and a faint signal appeared on the screen. "This is it," Marcus said, his voice filled with a quiet excitement. "The hidden world. It's been off the grid for years, and it's the perfect place to start. It's untouched, hidden deep in the heart of the galaxy." Lyra looked at the map, her eyes scanning the coordinates. "Do you think it will be enough? A place to start over?" Marcus nodded. "It has to be. It's the only shot we've got." The ship's engines shifted as they began their descent. The world below them was dark, but there were faint glimmers of light, signs of life, a place to rebuild. The landscape looked ancient, untouched by time, and it was clear that few had ever set foot here. As the ship touched down, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was it. This was the place where they would make their stand. They had escaped the darkness of their pasts, and now they had a chance to create something new, something that belonged to them. The door of the ship hissed open and a cool breeze swept inside. The air smelled fresh, wild, as if the planet itself had been waiting for them to arrive. Lyra stepped out first, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar terrain. She looked different now, stronger. She wasn't just a girl on the run. She was a force to be reckoned with. "We're here," Marcus said, stepping out behind her. "This is our new beginning." Lyra turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. "We've made it this far, Marcus. We're not turning back now." Together they stood at the edge of this new world. The galaxy was vast, filled with unknown dangers, but for the first time, Marcus believed they could change it. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Lyra by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. They had a future to fight for, and this time, it would be theirs to shape.